It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You could find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting. Just give me an email at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. That's how you get a hold of me. Our guest today, Jeremy Kuzmarov. He's the managing editor at Covert Action magazine, which was founded by Bill Kunstler and Philip Agee. This is a historically respected piece of journalism here, Covert Action magazine. You can find him there at covertactionmagazine.com. But he's just came up with a brand new book. Ink's not dry yet. Comes out December 1st. Warmonger: How Clinton's Malign Foreign Policy Launched the U.S. Trajectory from Bush 2 to Biden. Mr. Jeremy Kuzmarov, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
I think I had a little too much coffee this morning. Just a couple of too much sips there. But Jeremy, remind the audience, who is Jeremy Kuzmarov?
Well, I'm a historian, and I'm the managing editor of Covert Action magazine. So I've done a lot of research into the CIA and its history. And for numerous years, I was researching a book on Bill Clinton that's going to be published on December 1st. And it's kind of prequel because I previously published a book on Obama and his malign foreign policies. So this is kind of a prequel, and I guess is exposing the corruption in the Democratic Party, and the two-party system in general.
Hey, before we get into the book Warmonger, what's new over at Covert Action magazine? Anything popping out over
there? Yes, actually, check out in 2 weeks. We have a special on the Kennedy assassination. It's the 60th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination, and I did a major study over several years working with a presidential historian in Texas who's an expert, and looking at Lyndon Johnson's role in the assassination. So that article will be coming out on the anniversary date in about 2 weeks' time. And check out our website. We have a lot of articles. Because we've done a series on political assassinations, and I also had a very recent article on the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin in Israel, which was a major turning point in Israeli politics. And I looked at the role of Israel's deep state and the Israeli FBI in Rabin's assassination. They set up Yigal Amir as a patsy like Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, that Rabin assassination was so shady, man. And there's not a lot written about it either, is there?
Yeah, there are a couple books, but they're rather obscure by some Israeli authors. And I didn't know anything about it until actually somebody contacted me who's a reader of the magazine, who lives in Israel and knows a lot about it. And he urged me to write an article about it, and he helped me with it and pointed me to the one or two books and some sources to educate myself. So I learned a lot about it. But I had known nothing about it. I just accepted the official story until I dug into it. And that's been the case throughout my career. On almost every topic, I think one thing and then I start to dig into it, and it's the opposite is true.
I always said that the next book I write is going to be called The More I Learn, The Less I Know. The more of these shows I do, these interviews, I think you know what's going on in these different topics, but then you learn something new, and it's like you said, you're off on a different road.
Yeah.
And I think that's by design too. There's so many roadblocks put in our way and disinformation.
Absolutely.
Warmonger: How Clinton's Malign Foreign Policy Launched the U.S. Trajectory from Bush 2 to Biden. Tell us what's in the book.
Well, this book, I researched it over years because I live in Oklahoma, right near Arkansas, and I've spent time there. And I learned more and more about Clinton. And, I accepted the kind of media image of him, especially when I was younger. But then, the more I delved into it, the darker it got, really. And the first couple of chapters, deal with Clinton's, rise to political power, and the period when he was the governor of Arkansas, and his involvement in overseeing clandestine armed and drug smuggling operation from Mena Arkansas to the Nicaraguan Contras, and that kind of sets the groundwork, for the kind of foreign policy he carried out when he was the president, supporting shady covert operations and expanding, U.S. military power. And this was, a kind of watershed period, because you had even figures like Robert McNamara saying, now that the Cold War is over, it's time for a peace dividend. There's no Soviet threat anymore, so let's spend our money on, rebuilding American communities and invest in the American people and, healthcare and education. And, this is the architect of the Vietnam War is saying this, so this is no leftist radical. And I think a lot of people felt that way with the end of the Cold War. And I think Clinton, unfortunately, put the country on the opposite path. He developed new pretexts for waging wars, like humanitarian intervention and, play up the supposed genocide and, human rights abuses that would justify U.S. military intervention. But usually, it's very misleading and distorted, like in the, different cases I go into in the book, like in Bosnia. The Serbs were accused by Clinton and U.S. government of genocide, but really that was a very complex conflict. And, there were atrocities on all sides, but Serbia was trying to keep the Yugoslav Federation together, and the U.S. had actually been supporting Croats and Muslims in Bosnia and Herzegovina who wanted to break up the Yugoslav Federation. And, the U.S. had its own agenda. They kind of wanted to divide and rule, because Yugoslavia had been independent under Tito and kind of strong independent nation. And the U.S. had its eye on, controlling their region and setting up military bases. So they supported these secessionist movements, and the faction they were supporting were very corrupt, and the Muslim fundamentalists, and even networks of Al Qaeda were being mobilized against the Serbs. So this really was a very dirty war, but it was packaged as this humanitarian intervention, and I guess only Clinton could pull that off. And that's just one example, but it's a key one where the U.S. continued this militaristic and imperialistic foreign policy that could have changed after the Cold War, and Clinton was the perfect leader for that.
Yeah, I remember at the time, because I was young, I was like barely 30, and a friend of mine from church, her whole family came from Croatia, and they were just like in shock. Like, why is the U.S. government supporting these really horrible fundamentalist terrorists, like you said, these really horrible people, and just really there's no logical explanation of why we would. What was the motivation? Why would we choose that those extremists to do our bidding over there?
Well, because it was a policy of divide and conquer. Yugoslavia under Tito was a socialist state that was the non-aligned movement. Tito put Yugoslavia as a leader of the non-aligned movement and forged an independent foreign policy from the United States as well as from the Soviet Union. And the country was very strong under Tito, and the quality of life was very high. But the U.S. wanted to dominate the region and establish, because eventually the U.S. was able to establish military bases at Camp Bondsteel after the Kosovo War. And, Serbia under Milosevic was trying to keep the Yugoslav Federation together because as a strong, independent country. And Milosevic was more of a socialist. And the U.S., was trying to, and this was the period at the collapse of the Soviet Union that socialist governments were falling out everywhere. So he was one remnant socialist, and they had to get rid of him. So they supported these secessionist factions, and the Croats committed horrendous atrocities too in the war. And their leader, the Muslim leader was Izetbegovic, and the Croat leader was Franko Tuđman. But he also had very regressive views, and even been supportive like the Nazis in World War II. So the U.S. was supporting these, terrible groups.
Yeah.
But their end goal was to break up the Yugoslav Federation so they could have military bases, and they were trying to impose like these free trade agreements that would benefit U.S. corporations and keep the region fragmented so that they could exert more power. And also also another goal was to expand NATO and give legitimacy for NATO. So they just kind of wanted a war because NATO really had no purpose at the end of the Cold War. I mean, NATO was set up as an instrument of the Cold War as part of the containment strategy against the Soviet Union. And so with the fall of the Soviet Union, people are calling for the dissolution of NATO. There's no reason for NATO to exist. So this gave a reason by claiming Serbia was committing genocide. They could say, "Oh, we need NATO," and it was used as a way to expand NATO. And Clinton expanded NATO toward Russia's border, and that provoked a new Cold War with Russia, which had wanted, good relation with the end of the Soviet Union. The new Russian leadership felt that it could be a new era cooperation, and that Russia could be integrated into a European security alliance. But instead, the U.S. pursued a course of expanding NATO and antagonizing Russia and encouraging more nationalistic elements, anti-Western elements, to come to power in Russia and creating a new Cold War, basically.
Yeah, I remember the propaganda on TV back in those days talking about how the enemy had these bombs that were shaped like dolls, that the children would pick up the dolls and blow up, and that they were killing puppies. They were actually saying that they were killing puppies over there. And that was extreme for them. But you look today, you see the propaganda we have on Twitter today on a daily basis. It's beyond belief. But we kind of brushed over Clinton's origins in Arkansas. How far back do his CIA connections go?
Well, Cord Meyer Jr. was a prominent CIA official. Admitted, I guess he got drunk or something, and he said, "Oh, Clinton all along was one of us," And it's believed that he was recruited either at Georgetown or when he got a Rhodes Scholarship in Oxford. And then his roommate was Strobe Talbot, who became very high in a high position in the State Department, and is considered one of the fathers of the Russiagate hoax. And he came from a very well-connected family. His uncle was, I believe, very high up in the Pentagon. And then Talbot and Clinton went to Russia while they were students at Oxford. And it should be noted that Clinton never graduated because he was accused of sexual assault on a woman, a student, while at Oxford. And the FBI report said that Clinton was not a serious student. He was there at a party. But he was a serial offender, against women, not just affairs, but actual sexual abuse and rape of women. It's pretty well established that he was a sexual predator from an early age. But with regard to the CIA, him and Talbot were sent on a mission into Russia, and it only could have been funded by the CIA. And the mission was to smuggle out the memoirs and translate the memoir of Nikita Khrushchev and get other writing of Khrushchev, because Khrushchev had denounced Stalin, and that served the U.S. purpose, in the Cold War, to show how oppressive the Soviet Union was under Stalin. And Talbot was a Russia expert, and he worked for Time magazine after he graduated and became, I believe, the head of the Time magazine Russia desk for a while, and he had knowledge of the Russian language. So him and Clinton were together, and that's believed to be a CIA mission. It's also alleged that Clinton was involved with anti-war, a few anti-war protests, although they said he was always on the moderate wing of the anti-war movement. But it's believed that he was actually an informant on the anti-war movement because he had been recruited in the CIA. So it really went far back. And then he had a connection with Winthrop Rockefeller, was the governor of Arkansas in the 60s. He had moved to Arkansas. He was part of the Rockefeller dynasty. And Clinton's mother was Rockefeller's best friend in the Army in World War II, was a cousin of Clinton's mother. So Clinton had a connection with the kind of Arkansas power elite through this cousin. Again, his mother's cousin was best friend with Winthrop Rockefeller. So, because they set him up after he graduated Yale, he was given a job as a professor just out of law school,
Wow.
which was unprecedented, at the University of Fayetteville. And then he immediately started running for office and became Arkansas Attorney General. And then when he became the governor, he was the youngest governor in Arkansas history at the age of 32. I mean, he did have certain political skills that I think, Hillary didn't have. He was very jovial personality, and he could give good speeches for different audiences and kind of tell them what they wanted. Of course, he always betrayed, like the head of the AFL-CIO in Arkansas said, "Oh yeah, Clinton will pat you on the back and then piss down your leg." So they came to learn over time that he was disingenuous, but he was a typical lying politician. But he came across very well in speeches, and he made friends with everybody. So he had a jovial personality, so he was in that way a very skilled politician. But yeah, he obviously had some powerful people supporting his career to rise that quickly. And then when he was the governor of Arkansas, he basically turned the state into a CIA playground. Yeah. He allowed these operations with Barry Seal in Mena, which is in the western corner of the state. He set up out of the Mena Airport, he was running arms and drugs to Nicaraguan Contras, and they were laundering a lot of the money in Arkansas banks. And investigations have found, huge, dark money going into the banking system. That was all very suspicious, but it was never, thoroughly investigated.
It was the Attorney General who was going to investigate it. He's going to investigate himself.
Yeah, exactly. He was the Attorney General and the governor when this was going on, and he had control over all the police. He really kind of ran Arkansas like he was like Boss Tweed. He controlled everything in the state and made sure this was carried out. And allegedly, according to whistleblower Terry Reid, there was a kind of quid pro bargain that the CIA would help elevate his career and help get him into the White House, which was always his goal.
Yeah, I interviewed one of the attorneys for the Boys on the Tracks, and in his Freedom of Information Act request, he describes how one of Clinton's state trooper bodyguards wanted to get a job with the CIA, and Clinton said, "Okay, I'm going to send you off on this interview, right? Job interview." And the job interview consisted of a drug run to Colombia. Okay. He was actually, no pretense whatsoever.
Exactly, L.D. Brown, because he wrote a memoir about this. Yeah.
Okay, great.
The guy who was sent on the drug run, he became a whistleblower, so
Now, what about Hillary's background, though? Like, how did these two hook up? Does she have CIA background, too, or?
It is alleged. There's less evidence. It hasn't been proven, but it has been alleged by some authors that she was recruiting. Because she became a prominent student leader at Wellesley. She gave some speeches and got some national attention for speeches that she gave against the Vietnam War. Then she went to work on the Watergate. She was a lawyer in Watergate. But that whole operation, as I think is very fishy, and the CIA was involved in the effort to bring down Nixon because he had threatened to reorganize the U.S. national security bureaucracy and was going after the CIA in some way that they didn't like. So it would make sense if she was in the CIA. And then, she married Clinton, and it was kind of more it was not a marriage of love, but a political arrangement, and each out for their own career. And Hillary became a law partner at the Rhodes law firm, and that firm represented. Well, firstly, it represented many of Clinton's big donors. The top economic powers in the state, like Walmart, and Hillary was appointed to the board of Walmart and the Stevens Investment House. And Jack Stevens, who is a big supporter of Clinton. And he was connected with the Mena affair and the CIA because he set up this data mining company called Systematics. And he also owned a lot of the Arkansas banks, that they were laundering a lot of the drug money. And he seems to have been a big figure behind the Mena operation. and Hillary was his lawyer. So, and the Rhodes law firm, I think, did a lot of the legal tricks to help this money laundering, as well as to funnel money into Bill's campaigns, including through the Whitewater deals. That was a major scandal where they, Clinton's partner was sold under the bus, James McDougal, and he took the rap for it. But there was all kind of criminal activity there, things like money laundering and financial crimes through these land deals. And Clinton was using his office to basically enrich himself, like he was ensuring roads were built, because this was like remote land that they bought, and they were going to set up vacation homes. So he was like ensuring that roads were built, to connect to the land and to ensure this would be a profitable venture. So there's all kinds of corrupt things going on there, and Hillary's involved in all of that as a partner in the Rhodes law firm, and her and Vince Foster. And that's one reason Foster was ultimately probably killed, because he knew he had intimate details as a lawyer working with Clinton about the Mena affair and all kinds of illegal money laundering operations, campaign finance violations. And when he was the White House special counsel, he ended up being murdered, although they claimed he committed suicide, but it was very clearly a murder.
Oh, yeah, we've done many shows about the Vince Foster situation. And very interesting, too, that Brett Kavanaugh was one of the guys who was interrogating the witnesses in Vince Foster death. And he laughs. There's a recording of him laughing. It's on YouTube. You can listen to it, laughing about how he covered up for the Clintons. Brett Kavanaugh. So a lot of these characters from back in those days are still... William Barr was up to his neck in Iran-Contra, Same crew of guys over and over.
Exactly. Their careers get promoted for covering up all these massive crimes. And, Barr, according to whistleblower Terry Reid, I don't know if you ever had him on your show, but did you?
No, I think he passed, no?
Maybe he passed away, because he wrote the book. He wrote a major book on this.
Sure.
And he was an insider who helped supply the planes, and he wrote about Barr visiting with Clinton and as an associate of William Casey and making this bargain with him. Apparently Clinton was skimming a lot of the money for himself, off the drug deals, as was his brother Roger Clinton, who was deep into the drug trade in that period. But they were kind of calling out Clinton to stop skimming money. And they said that, we'll get you where you want to go, the White House, if you just toe the line. So,
yeah, like I was saying, Ollie North was involved in that meeting too, as well. And Roger Clinton today is he lives a very obscure life in California, a very modest home, very modest lifestyle. So I wonder what happened there.
I don't know, but he was deep in the drug trade in the 80s, and then they gave him a slap on the wrist. But he was tied with the Colombian cartels, and he worked with Dan Lassiter, who was, he was like, before Jeffrey Epstein, there was Dan Lassiter, there was this party guy, bringing these underage women for these drug sex parties that Clinton was involved with, and his brother. And he was a big, he owned this ranch in New Mexico that was thought to be a major front for drug smuggling. And then he got a slap on the wrist too. He was Clinton's top donor, and he benefited. Like Clinton set up this Arkansas Development Agency, and Lassiter was a huge beneficiary of bonds and loans from the development. So he wasn't really promoting economic development in the state. He was just giving the money to his friends and big-time campaign donors who were also involved in illegal drug operations and tied with the CIA. And both Lassiter and Roger Clinton got some prison time, but it was just like a few months in prison when they were big-time drug smugglers. And ironically, Clinton was a huge supporter of the war on drugs, and he imposed draconian drug sentencing. While these guys got off scot-free.
Well, keep an eye on the competition, Of course, he's a war on his drug enemies. It's funny because just as you mentioned New Mexico, and then you got Zorro Ranch, Epstein's ranch in New Mexico. That's interesting, a coincidence. But I had written down here Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative, and how Epstein claimed to have helped create that foundation. To get into that, Epstein with his intelligence ties all over the world. Do you get into that in your book?
I don't address that, very much, but I did an article once on Epstein, and very clearly an intelligence operation, blackmail operation he was running with Ghislaine Maxwell, whose father was tied with various intelligence agencies.
Yeah, and Epstein got his job over at Tower Financial with Stephen Hoffenberg through Patrick Lease, who was also intelligence connected. Warmonger, How Clinton's Malign Foreign Policy Launched the U.S. Trajectory from Bush to Biden. That's the new book. It's coming out December 1st. We're going to have you come back because we only got a half hour left. We'll have you come back and do even more on this. What about Haiti?
Well, I go into that because Clinton orchestrated an invasion of Haiti, supposedly, again, on humanitarian pretext. They had a military government take over in the early 90s, and he was claiming that he had to remove this military government, and they brought back Jean-Bertrand Aristide, who had been originally overthrown. But, they imposed a lot of conditions on the kind of policies Aristide could institute. And he was basically, under the thumb of the United States. So, and they basically rehabilitated some of these corrupt military officers who never faced, punishment for human rights crimes. So, it wasn't really very, humanitarian in the end. Actually, it was really more so the U.S. could control the country, and so American corporations could move in more. And then, after the earthquake, they appointed in 2010. Later, they appointed Clinton to head the operations, and he ended up ensuring that a member of the Clinton family got all these choice deals and could make a huge amount of money off Haiti. So it was really about foreign corporate interests making money, and friends of the Clintons making money in Haiti, and actually improve the conditions in Haiti.
It's so blatant that the entity in Haiti that funnels and controls all of the foreign aid that comes into Haiti is the HRC. Okay, it's supposed to be like Haitian Relief, whatever, but HRC is also Hillary Rodham Clinton. You know what I mean? It's just so in your face. And her brother owns a mine down there, a big mining company down there. There's just so much corruption in that Haitian story. We've done so many shows about that. That just breaks your heart, man. What went on down there in Haiti.
Yeah.
You also get into. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I agree. Yeah, I mean the living condition of the people was horrible. And it was framed in this high-minded rhetoric, and I think Clinton was very skilled in getting liberals who were traditionally anti-war active, like in the Vietnam era, to support a lot of these interventions or not to protest. And Clinton it was this false image that he was this hippie and guy out of the '60s, and even I quote at one point in the book the founder of Rolling Stone, who's all excited before the '92 elections, finally our guys, and he comes, from the counterculture, and that was the key counterculture magazine, and he's everyone should rally around Clinton. Finally, somebody from our generation is coming into office, and it was a complete illusion. And I think these kind of people were totally hoodwinked. But that generation, just they were active in the protest movements and counterculture in the '60s, and they just completely sold out and embraced Clinton, so many of them, and they supported these kind of military interventions that, as you point out, was just really about plundering a country, and whether it's in the Balkans, whether it's in Haiti or other parts of the world, they had terrible consequences, but there was really no backlash. And the traditional anti-war elements, a lot of them just aligned with Clinton.
And it's amazing, too. How did they convince us of this? Is that, he smoked marijuana, but he didn't inhale, and he played the saxophone on David Letterman, was it? That was his counterculture cred?
Exactly. And I guess he was into the free love movement, but really he was a serial rapist.
Yeah.
So...
And then, I had on. I wanted to book on the show Wavy Gravy. You Romney, nobody for president, the guy from Woodstock. From the hog farm.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to book him on the show, and I'm talking to him, and he starts telling me about how he wants to come on and endorse Hillary Clinton. I said, man, dude, are you out of your mind? What happened to you? But he was another guy, another guy involved in the drug trade too, though. Where does Clinton's foreign policy strategy come from? Like what's his name? Carter had Zabriskie, and also too Obama had Zabriskie too. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Brzezinski, yeah, Brzezinski.
Brzezinski, yeah.
Who was Clinton's rabbi czar?
That's a good question. I think there was, figured like Anthony Lake, Strobe Talbot. These were, I think, some of the intellectual architect. I think Brzezinski was, a key figure. I think it's the same kind of people because Clinton was part of the New Democrats, and he, courted like large corporations, and he courted he was close apparently with Pamela Harriman, was the wife of Averell Harriman, who was one of the architects of the Cold War, and was actually a mentor of Joe Biden. So he was very close with Harriman. And that kind of circle of people, and I think Council of Foreign Relations. So I think those would be some of the people driving.
Well, what about Kissinger? Kissinger, because you hear about Hillary had a relationship with Kissinger early on, and I think he even spent Christmases with him up until the very end. No.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I don't know about Kissinger and Bill. I didn't find too much about that, but. It wouldn't surprise me. I think if Kissinger was behind the scenes wielding such great power as head of Kissinger Associates, I think it just came from traditional establishment sources and thinking.
And I guess CIA, Now,
exactly.
What else are we going to find toward the middle and the end of the book about the shady military interventions and such?
Well, one chapter addresses Africa as well as Congo and Rwanda,
right?
And I think that was a case where they hoodwinked the public because I think they kind of make every conflict out to be this kind of Hollywood film. There's good guys and bad guys, and we have to fight evil. And really, a lot of these conflicts are more complex. In the case of Rwanda. In a way, both the Hutu and the country was divided, and the colonial rule put these groups against each other, and it would elevate one over the other. The Belgians, I think, elevated the Tutsi, and the Hutu were really treated like slaves in the colonial era. And when they got their independence, there was a Hutu revolution, because they were the majority, and a lot of the Tutsis were exiled, and the Hutu massacred Tutsis, and then the Tutsis wanted revenge and came back. But they were the ones who orchestrated the whole, civil war in the early '90s that led to the genocide, and it started when Paul Kagame shot down the aircraft of the Hutu president after there were these peace accords that were attempting to reach some kind of agreement and power sharing arrangement. And the U.S. was actually all involved. They claimed that the U.S. was a bystander and should have done more to intervene, and then they intervene after to support the Kagame government, the Tutsi, when they invaded the Rwandan Patriotic Front, when they invaded Congo. But really, there were strategic ambition to control the Congo and its mineral wealth. And the Clinton administration was supporting RPF from the beginning, and CIA may have even helped in the shoot down of the aircraft because they wanted the Tutsi, they wanted a proxy government in Rwanda that could help to control Congo. And again, the Tutsi were made as an innocent victim, but they perpetrated the civil war, and they did a lot of the killing. Even in the events of April '94, it appeared that many more Hutu were killed than Tutsi, and a lot of them were being killed by the RPF and Kagame, and they even had to set up open-air crematorium because there were so many corpses. They had to find a way of better getting rid of the corpses and the smells. And the U.S. was supporting them in CIA from the beginning, and then they slaughtered tens of thousands of Hutu. They chased them into Congo. So this was and the U.S. had a lot of covert involvement in that. They were supplying a lot of military equipment and spy gear to the RPF, including as they carried out the invasion of Congo, as well as Uganda. So that's a hidden covert, very shady covert intervention that I go into in one of the chapters. So, and I think it's not that well known in the public. So hopefully, people will read the book and be better informed about that, and question U.S. policy today, because I think the U.S. is continuously supporting the Rwandan government, which has committed huge atrocities in Congo, especially, that are still going on. So that's one case. I have chapters like on Russia and the NATO expansion and how that really created a new Cold War when it might not have happened that way. We could have peace with Russia and we wouldn't have a threat of nuclear war breaking out in this disaster in Ukraine. I go into China. Clinton was one to first break with Nixon. Nixon, I think, had the right approach to China. When he established a cooperative arrangement and went to China and reestablished U.S. diplomatic relations with China, and that lasted for several decades. But Clinton first started kind of saber-rattling with Taiwan, and was really beefing up the Taiwanese military, and even provoked an incident that almost led to the outbreak of war. That kind of aggressive policy, antagonistic to China and Russia, is something I criticize, and that set the groundwork for today. And I also go into Middle East, and he really set the groundwork for the Bush administration's invasion of Iraq. He was supporting anti-Saddam politicians who were very shady, and even there was a coup that Scott Ritter compared to an Iraqi Bay of Pigs, because the coup was crushed by Saddam, but it was supported by the CIA under Clinton. And the U.S. under Clinton was bombing Iraq and promoting regime change, and also promoting false claims about weapons of mass destruction. It was Clinton that started those false claims that Ritter had debunked. And then there's, Clinton really started the war on terror. And he was, because there were all kinds of terrorists. Al-Qaeda, had turned on the United States after the end of the Afghan war. The U.S. had, supported a lot of the Mujahideen to fight the Soviets. And then they got, the Soviet enemy was defeated. So they turned on the United States, in part because the U.S. had military bases in Saudi Arabia. And there were all kinds of terrorist attacks. Now, some of those attacks are rather shady if you look into them. They could be false flag operations in some cases. But Clinton, ratcheted up the war on terror, and he was using the methods that became famous later, like extraordinary rendition, where they kidnap somebody and without due process, and send them to be tortured in Egypt. When at that time Hosni Mubarak, they were sending them to countries where they know the brutal leader like Hosni Mubarak, and that they would be badly tortured. And there was no judicial process, due process. Clinton started that. It was just expanded massively under Bush. And then Obama, he started using drones quite extensively, including the Balkan conflict and in the Middle East. He started, bombing countries, like he bombed Afghanistan. They claimed, to target Al-Qaeda. And he bombed Sudan. And that was a complete disaster. It was claimed that it was actually like a pharmaceutical plant, but they claimed it was manufacturing chemical weapons.
I remember.
But there was no evidence of that. And it took out a pharmaceutical plant, and it killed a lot of people and deprived people of medicine. And there was really no credible evidence. So it's that kind of foreign policy of just, bomb first and trying to find evidence later, and you don't even have the evidence, that angered people around the world, and it was just a reckless foreign policy from my point of view.
We're talking to Jeremy Kuzmarov. He's the managing editor at Covert Action Magazine. You can find that at covertactionmagazine.com. And the book we're talking about is Warmonger, how Clinton's malign foreign policy launched the U.S. trajectory from Bush to Biden. Now you're saying that this policy continues then all the way today till Biden's policies.
Yeah, and you find a lot of continuity. You know, some of the people who came up in the Clinton administration became prominent in later Democratic administration, like Obama and Biden, and it's the same kind of policy, you know, antagonizing Russia and China. When you've had, you know, better models from the past that could have been continued, like the Nixon, and I don't think Nixon was a great person. I mean, he's kind of a slimy guy who did a lot of shady things in his own right, but I think some of his policies were good that could have been followed up on, like his policy towards China and Russia. You know, there's with the end of the Cold War, I mean, there are also past model like the FDR administration that promoted, you know, cooperative policy with the Russians, or even, you know, John F. Kennedy, who spoke about the need for détente, and even Nixon promoted détente. And that, with the end of the Cold War, there was really a good opportunity to establish a cooperative relation with the Russians. But instead, Clinton antagonized them by expanding NATO and also pushing this shock therapy. I mean, the U.S., you know, could have encouraged, if they're committed to free market and privatization, they could have encouraged that. But what they did was just like, you know, rammed it down their throat, you know, supporting this, you know, rapid shift from a state-run economy to privatization, but through a corrupt process in Russia, where they sold off Russian state assets at pennies to the dollar to corrupt cronies of President Yeltsin. And American corporations were moving in to gobble up control of Russian natural resources. And that was a disaster for Russia's economy. I mean, Russia's economy collapsed in the 90s. It was worse than the Great Depression in the United States. Yeah. And there was, you know, starvation in the country. And the life standard actually, I think, it dropped by 7 or 8 years. It's like unprecedented in human history that the living age dropped about 7 years within a span of 7 or 8 years. So that was a disastrous policy that led to a huge backlash against the United States, combined with the expanding NATO towards countries bordering Russia. It created a new Cold War in the future. And unfortunately, though, we've seen a continuity where there's like Russophobic officials are in control of U.S. foreign policy, and they're really intent on weakening, destroying Russia instead of forging a cooperative relationship. So it's that kind of approach to foreign policy, and again, the establishment of these fake humanitarian pretexts for bombing and playing up the human rights abuses. And we've seen that almost taken to a high art form with people like Samantha Power and Hillary Clinton and the Obama Biden administration. You know, now they play up the Uyghur genocide, somehow justifies the U.S. encircling China militarily and potentially attacking China. Although there's really, it's kind of shady. We don't know what's really going on in the Uyghur provinces, and a lot of people have said that actually it was more like a rehabilitation programs where people had been Muslim extremists in the Xinjiang province were sent to schools for retraining and so they wouldn't be Muslim terrorists. So many question that narrative of genocide, just like the false claim of genocide was saying in Serbia. I mean, yes, Serbia did commit atrocities against the Croats. It was an ugly ethnic war, but there's no evidence of genocide by Serbia, and the worst atrocities in the war were committed by Croatian Muslim extremists. So it's just a misleading narrative to sell bombing and war and military intervention. And Clinton, took that to a pretty high art form, and then it was expanded further by Obama and Biden. And we see Democrats championing these huge military budgets and championing military intervention. They're often the most hawkish, and we've seen that in the Biden administration with Ukraine. It's only the Republicans who are now mobilizing to cut off military aid to Ukraine, where the Democrats have been the most gung-ho and zealous proponents of that, and even people like Bernie Sanders, who should know better. So I think Clinton set that trajectory, and it's a shift from the 60s, where you had a lot of Democrats who were legitimately anti-war figures and anti-CIA, like Frank Church, had the Church Committee hearing to expose the CIA corruption, and George McGovern. These were kind of, that William Fulbright, even in Arkansas, was a pretty leading opponent of the Vietnam War. But now the Democrats are even more hawkish than the Republicans, and I think Clinton was a turning point in that respect.
Then what do you make then? Because your average Republican congressman, even Marjorie Taylor Greene, like these kind of people, Bulbert, even they must realize that Clinton CIA, that Obama CIA, that they were hawkish, that they built up, they didn't decimate the military. But is it a show when they come out and say, "Oh, Clinton's a socialist, and Hillary's medical care was a socialist program, and Obamacare is socialism"? When they say this, do they say this out of ignorance, or is this part of a show? Are they in on it? What is going on?
I think it's maybe a political strategy. Maybe some of them are definitely ignorant. But I think many of them would know what socialism is, and that these leaders are the opposite of socialists. They're totally in league with the corporate interests. And, Obama bragged about how much money he made for the banks, big banks, and, a socialist would nationalize those banks. So, I think it's just a show, a dog and pony show.
Yeah, because they're both sides of capitalists. Both sides, both the Democrats and the Republicans are both capitalists.
Exactly.
It's really, oh my God. So then, Jeremy, man, you write this book. You must have spent a lot of time writing this book, right?
Yeah.
Okay, man. Warmonger: How the Clintons' malign foreign policy launched the U.S. trajectory from Bush to Biden. Jeremy Kuzmarov. Kuzmarov. You can find it on Amazon. It's up there for sale, pre-sale right now. Is this going to change anybody's mind? Is anybody going to change their mind? Is this going to do, not to say that Jeremy Kuzmarov isn't doing great work, but is this going to do a lick of good in the world, man? Is it going to change anybody's mind and change any policy, anything?
I think it would change a small number of people. Unfortunately, from my experience, people just develop emotion. A lot of politics is really about emotional, and they develop emotional attachment to certain political candidates, or they have certain deep-rooted beliefs, maybe from childhood, and they cling to those, and no amount of evidence would convince them. And that's kind of disillusioning when you see that as you experience life and get older. But I tried in my career to reach out to students and promote good grounded, solid critiques of current policies or politicians, and to teach them to try and research topics objectively, independently, and so I think we can reach a small number of people. Unfortunately, it probably won't change this malign trajectory that I've cited in the title. I'm sure it'll go on and on. It's gone on for hundreds of years, and it will go on until it self-destructs. But at least the truth is out there, and I think small groups of people can be effective in opposing and charting a better course for society. The more that are better informed and that see problems related to, for instance, the military-industrial complex can band together and make a difference. I mean, one example, like I end my Obama book by discussing there was a movement to reconvert the American economy toward more peace-oriented economy, and to work with large corporations, instead of producing weapons, that these corporations have tremendous capabilities and employ all the scientific brain power, that they would, like Boeing, the movement was working with Boeing to convert weapons plants into a factory that would produce public, subways and a thing that could be very useful for society. And that movement was really flourishing in the 60s and 70s. There was an economist named Seymour Melman who wrote about it, and he was connecting with congressmen, and even the Speaker of the House, Jim Wright, was behind it. But then there was an attack. Wright was accused of some phony crime, and he was removed from his position, and Newt Gingrich led the attack and he was part of getting money from Lockheed Martin. But I mean, if this movement had expanded, I mean, it was making a difference, and it was starting. There was real momentum for it. So I feel like if more people are well informed, a movement like that could really take off. So I don't think it's futile, the kind of work I do or others like yourself to try and educate the public and build some kind of movement for a more peace-oriented and less corrupt society. I think it could yield fruit over time.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I tell you, sometimes I think I'm just spitting in the wind, and it's and I'll read that I'm a crypto right-winger, some kind of crazy thing. Or, I'm in favor of the...
Yeah, they want all kinds of attacks on you, yeah. Because they don't want to engage with what you say, so they just smear you with some kind of label. I would hope people would grow up. Unfortunately, we seem to see that all the time, and people buy those smears, but you just got to keep going. It does make some difference, and if there weren't people like us, then the truth wouldn't be known, at all. So,
well, Jeremy Kuzmarov, on that note, you left me off on a positive note. I'll take it and try and do what I can with it today. Get through the day. Warmonger: How Clinton's malign foreign policy launched the U.S. trajectory from Bush to Biden. And don't forget, Covert Action magazine. They got some really good people over there doing really good work. Support them over there at covertactionmagazine.com. Jeremy, thank you so much, man. And like I said, anytime you want to come back, just let me know.
Okay.
Good night, sir.
Great.